Okay, so we're going to get started back up. I welcome back from break. I hope you had a wonderful, relaxing, rejuvenating break. Good to be back. We obviously have a lot of Photoshop left to cover, and today we're really going to start getting into more of the advanced Photoshop techniques. The exercise is going to change slightly from what's printed on the page. I tried this out this morning, and some of the people didn't seem to finish where I thought they were going to, so I misjudged the time. So we're going to cut some stuff off the end of this. Though this is a lot of work, and it's definitely something that's important for you to get the hang of, because you're going to need it as we go forward. And when you do assignment 102, you're certainly going to need these skills. So I thought I would start today, before we get into the actual demo work, which is the bulk of what we're doing. I thought I would introduce a bunch of example projects that kind of work with assignment 102 in terms of getting your mind thinking about what kind of works and what doesn't. And certainly some of these will border on the creepy, but that's to be expected. The truth is that what the assignment 102 seeks to do is to bend reality and to give us an example image or an image that could kind of potentially happen because we're visually seeing it. We're fooling ourselves into believing that it exists when in fact it's false. It's been made up of component pieces. So an image like this, obviously this is not a three-eyed person. It's two separate photographs that have been combined together to make one photo out of it. And when you kind of look initially at it, you're a little bit confused on is it actually a three-eyed person or not. And so that's kind of the fun of this, and it's meant for you to have a good time and to play around with it. Sometimes it's about seeing what could potentially go together. I don't think this is the best example because the shadows don't match on the toes to the way the tree is, so the lighting conditions are off. Something like this is done frequently, and it's a relatively easy thing to do, very simple in its masking, but it's a combination of two photos. It's a photo of a younger person looking against a photo of an older person, or vice versa in a mirror, so you see that transition. And I'll show you a couple more variants on this general theme. But it's as simple as taking a picture, the first picture being the old person with their reflection in the mirror, and then substituting the younger person in the exact same picture, and then the mirror of one picture versus the mirror of the other picture in terms of how they come together. So it's a pretty simple mask to do, pretty easy to execute. Something like this might involve a little bit more work, but it's a little bit more on the creepy side at the same time. But it can be done, and it's certainly something that you could explore should you be interested in. This one's just plain weird. Something like this is again how you see reality in terms of, you've got the hands that are growing other hands, etc., the way trees would. To me, this is less successful because it has no background. It has no integration into the background. So it looks like a fake object. And I think if it had a background and was integrated such that it kind of surprised you instead of dominated the composition, it might be a little bit more intriguing. Something like this doesn't have the background, and again, I think I might rather have the background, but it's so well done that I couldn't exclude it. Part of the thing about deciding what to do when it comes to this is looking at the way things might naturally join together. So if we look at this image of the shoes, if you look at leather shoes, they always have wrinkles that run across the toes where people walk. And so the combination of those wrinkles, coupled with the wrinkles that are naturally in your knuckles or the knuckles of your toes, the two come together rather nicely. So you take the wrinkles of the shoes that are kind of coming down here in that pattern, and they match up with the wrinkles on the toes, and suddenly the two sets start to come together. Obviously there's some Photoshop work to adjust the color of the toes for them to come together as well as they do, but just naturally finding that commonality can really help in terms of how you bring these two images together. This one's a little bit, I think it would be more successful if it was a person's photograph rather than the mannequin. This one is really, really well done. I've seen people try to do something similar, and it's a lot about getting the perspective just right and the lighting just right for these actually to come together as nicely as they do. But the combination of the leaf and the face and the kind of how they work together in this is particularly well done. Something like this is really a matter of depth of field, right? The things that are behind the face is blurred out, And the fact that they're blurred out really helps this image because we don't worry about, other than the black area that represents the puzzle piece, we don't need to see the inside, we don't need to see the edge of the puzzle piece, it's just the shape of the puzzle piece that's acting. And then obviously the eye pulled into the front, into the foreground is a very nice compositional technique to add dimension to the particular photo. Sometimes it's a combination of like a line drawing or a filter or something that's interacting with another set of photos and how those various pieces come together. Right? Sometimes it's seeing, this is kind of like seeing the shapes in the clouds or whatever. You know, when you look at the abstract shapes and you come up with it, you see the ends of all the carrots and you think, what if one of them was an eyeball instead? I mean, you know, so it's those kinds of things and how they kind of come together. I really like this image. I think this is fantastic. But part of the reason it works is the way that the lighting of the scene kind of works. It fits. It feels like the arms belong reaching out of the toilet, right? If I were to pick on anything, it would be how this hand, the shadow doesn't quite work as it wraps around. It's pretty close, but if you were going to pick on what doesn't quite work, I think that would be it. A combination here of the cracked earth coupled with the eye and the correlation of skin to the cracked earth, I think it works pretty well. It also works well because it's so close up, right? And the combination of the vibrancy of the eye and the color in contrast to the black and white of the earth, I think works nicely as part of a composition. So this is another major theme that people tend to do variants on, which I think is again well done. And that is the missing piece in the photo. So here, in this particular example, you would take a picture of your feet with your pants down, right? Obviously, your legs would go through. And then you very carefully step out of your pants and take another photo from the exact same angle with the exact same lighting, such that you could see the inside of your pants without the legs. And then it's a combination of those two images that come together that kind of blur the reality of things. And you'll see more examples of this as we go forward and kind of how they work together. This one, I apologize, it's a little bit blurry, but it's the same concept where the skin detaches from the face. Similar in its general theme. Something like this works particularly nice because of the lighting in the scene and the fact that the person who's hiding behind the mug of coffee has a shadow that's being cast in relation to where the light is coming from. Right? So the fact that the lighting conditions kind of work make this a realistic image. So you want to pay attention to the two images that you take and make sure that the light comes from the same direction and that the elements that you put together cast shadows into the scene. It's one real good way of integrating the two. I don't know, this one just seems silly, but I like it. So another variant on the theme of the younger looking into the older mirror reflection thing. In this case, it's the kitten and it's seeing the reflection of the lion. So this brings up a good point about assignment 102, and that is that while you may have access to take the picture of the kitten against the reflection, you might not have access to get the picture of the lion. Certainly, I don't have a lion roaming around my house to take a picture of. So when it comes to something like this, I don't mind if you use a Creative Commons licensed image as long as you link back and say this is where I got the image. But at least one of the images that you're combining should be your own. Right? So I'm not looking for just a conglomeration of other people's images that you put together. You need to at least take one image yourself. But if you need the picture of the lion and you can't find it, I understand. Right? Sometimes it's about bending, the reality of what's really possible. And so in this case, the same kind of thing. But again, well composed. Unless you're really good at photographing liquids in kind of slow motion freeze frame, I don't think this is a realistic combination of images. However, I think it's really, really well done, so I had to show it to you. Right? Another example here of, it's a little bit on the silly side, but it's composed well, and I think this is a particularly good example of consistent lighting in the two photos. So in this particular instance, right, we have the lighting of the mom, right, is coming from this side going that direction. So we have shadowing on the back side here, right? Same thing when we take the photo of the baby, right? Light's coming from this side with the shadowing there. Part of the reason these two images combine so well is because the light is so consistent in both images. So when you set up these kinds of shots, you really want to make sure that those lighting conditions match up. And that's part of how the images can tie so nicely together, right? I just think this one's cute. I couldn't resist. right? Goofy but cute. I think this one's a very different juxtaposition of scales, but I think it, literally fish scales, but no, in scales in terms of big and large and small. And I think that it's particularly well done too, because lighting conditions are relatively uniform, but the two blend really, really nicely together. And getting these images is obviously challenging, but at the same time they kind of blend the two scales nicely together, and I think it's really well done. Right? Something like this with the broken pottery of the hands versus the pot itself is safe. This is a pretty hard one to do unless you break something, right? So you would have to apply your skin as a texture on top of the broken pieces. It's pretty hard to fake broken pieces unless you really know what you're doing. So this might involve the sacrifice of something if you were going to try to do the broken piece. So another example here of the juxtaposition of scales and how these two images come together. But again, part of it is how the light works in the scene. So if we look down here at this little person, okay, notice that the shadow's coming from slightly behind the person, the sun is coming from behind the person. We get a little bit of shadow in the foreground here. If we look at the guitar, the same thing is happening. The light's coming slightly from the back, and we're getting these little rings, right, as part of the highlights there, but the face of the guitar is actually lit from, it's reflected lights. The sun is behind the guitar, and that's part of what makes this compositionally work. So it's paying attention to those lighting conditions that make these really work nicely. So another example where you've removed something, right? So in this case, it's a kind of a unique combination, and I think they've taken it a little bit further, which I like. And that is that the person is obviously sitting and ironing their clothes, but the clothes come off of them and onto the board. But they've also added themselves back in at the bottom where you've got feet dangling at the end. So it's this combination of I exist, I don't exist, and then I exist again. So it's taking it one step further, and I think it's well done and certainly well composed as the final image. This is a little bit of a blending of perspectives in terms of how these pieces of the room come together, where you've got the upper view transitioning to the lower view. It's kind of creative and kind of different. This one would be hard to do without some melted ice cream. And again, part of the reason it's successful is because of the consistency of the lighting in the scene as they go forward. You guys can see this a little bit better than the morning class did, but I think this is also very well done, where the bed sheet turns into the winterscape. It's definitely clearer on the computer screen than it is on the projector, but there's little details that work nicely, like the tree that's in the bedroom with the snow and the little bits of snow as the sheet transitions into that. So it's really seeing how to transition those various pieces together. Something like this, another great example of two images taken at two different times from the exact same spot. So we've got one image that is the kind of daytime sunny scene, and then we've got the stormy scene of the same image. And then it's a matter of applying one image on top of these sheets of paper that are being rolled out in the third image. Now this probably involved 3 total images, one being the shot behind, one being the shot during the day, and one image involving the person and the ladder and the rolls. Right? Over in here, you could probably fake this okay in Photoshop with some collaging, but the actual roll and the person on the ladder is probably a third image that's put together. I particularly like the little bit of grass that's one-sided as part of this roll down in the corner. So little details like that can really enhance the overall combination of images. So a little bit more surrealistic, but still kind of entertaining. The tree upside down with a little bit of roots coming out, I think, helps in this particular image. This one, different take on it altogether, where the boards being painted become the ocean. But I think part of what's nice is that it's a black and white image except for the paint. So the paint has that blue color, and it makes it kind of this surrealistic image. I think this one was particularly well done as well. The image was taken in two positions, one being the person dragging the tarp behind them to get that kind of folding pattern, and the other obviously of the road, and then blending the two together such that you're kind of pulling the road out and laying it down. I think it's really well done. Again, very nicely composed as an overall image. I'm less enthralled with this one. I think it's a little bit more on the weird side, but such is life. This one's a pretty fun difference. And I think part of the reason this works as well as it does is because of the person and the bike at the top. and that they're interacting with the scene and kind of wondering, ooh, how did this happen and why is it so bizarre, right? But it's a combination of views that have been folded together to create this strange transition. Another example here of kind of sheets becoming winter, right, and the combination of the two scenes. I like this one, right? There's just something about it that's entertaining. Breaking reality a bit in terms of how they come together, but it's still within the reason of kind of entertainment. This one would be particularly hard to do because it would involve a lot more work. You have to create the inside of the house in the section, so it would be a lot more pieces that would have to come together for it to happen. But I think it was really well done, so it's worth showing. Right? The converse kind of shoe turning into the paint splatters, same general concept. But again, hard to execute unless you have really good photography skills. Turning the person into stone, relatively reasonable to do. It's just a combination of two different images and how they come together. Right? So let's move from the professional or pro examples into student examples that have been done. But again, it's very much about composition, and it's about seeing how things can combine. So here we've got the image of the rock cliff, and we insert the dog in the dog's mouth. And so some of that is just seeing that these two images could come together. Right? Not too much that you have to worry about relating to the lighting conditions because you've got the inside of the dog's mouth, kind of like the cave. Right? So this is an example that was done a while back, and obviously the image of the model was not his image, but the apple and kind of the combination of the two. So this is an example where they used somebody else's image, but they adapted it and worked upon it and kind of took that bite out. Part of what I think is particularly successful is the fact that it's selectively colored in the image. The apple is colored, and the eyes are colored, and the rest is in black and white. And it's the combination of those two that work particularly nicely. So this particular photo was not so much a collage of the person. The person is the person's photo, but all of the tattoos and stuff were added, and also the backdrop and the lines and all of that were added, and the zipper across the mouth were added. So it's a combination of little pieces that make the overall composition. This one's a little bit on the creepy side, and I think it would be far more successful if it didn't have quite such a dark background. And so the background dominates the photo a little bit too much. Right? This one was extraordinarily well done. Again, compositionally nice to be slightly off center, and then the combination of the cat and the girl put together end up being rather creepy, but at the same time really nicely done and well executed. So I think those worked very nicely. Right? So this one I include because it is not by any means the best photo in the world. Right? Compositionally, it's not that great. It's a rather generic, face-on flash photo. But the reason it works so nicely is because both the images were shot in the exact same way. Right? So you take the picture of the dog with the flash in the front, and you take a picture of the pigs in the flash in the same manner. So the lighting conditions match, therefore the two images go nicely together. Right? This one's a little bit more on the artistic side and kind of breaking the boundaries of what's possible. Compositionally very nice, but a little bit beyond the scope of what normally tends to happen. Image here is flower petals upside down becoming the dress. Again, a very simple image, a simple one to do, but very, very well done. Good lighting conditions. The shadow behind that falls on the back of the flower petal matches up with the way that the dancer's shadow also falls. So a combination of drawing here and the actual image and the tattoos reaching into the photo can be a really good way of breaking the frame and creating a compositionally interesting drawing. You guys all saw this on the handout. This is the colored version of it, but very much the same, but relatively simple to do, right? One picture of the girl standing against the wall, and then one picture of the t-shirt hanging from the wall, and then it's a combination such that everything that's here, right, is the picture of the t-shirt against the wall, and everything that's outside of that becomes just the picture of the person leaning against the wall, right? So it's just that combination of two. So Bekem did this one, and I think it's a really good example, particularly because the shadows work so nicely in this. So she went out and she took a picture of herself sitting on one of the architecture lab stools. Obviously, you recognize the setting here, right? It's the ET buildings. So she took a picture of herself sitting on the stool, and then she took a picture from the exact same location that was nothing there. It was just the natural setting. And she was able to mask off, right, where the stool was, but she paid attention to not only get rid of the foreground object, the stool, but also the shadow that the stool cast on the wall. So it's the combination of those two that make this very, very successful. Another example here of the, I woke up and I have no legs. Again, in the similar vein to what we've been talking about in the combination of just the two images. Right? Similar in this one, bleeding one image through, but I think compositionally this one works really nicely, even though it's a little bit on the strange side. Right? Again, it's what you see in the world, and so maybe you might see something like this. Again, compositionally very interesting, but the lighting conditions match up. So the photo of the woman and the photo of the violinist or the celloist or whatever it is. I'm not a musician, so you can correct me if I was incorrect in what I was calling it, but you get the idea. The lighting condition on both of those match up, and that's important. Right? The little figures that end up in the smoke, similar examples in kind of how those go together. A little bit more involved, a little bit more complicated, certainly a more advanced topic. So this one, you may or may not see it at first. It's the face that's in the bark. Somehow it's harder to see it on the projector than it is on the screen itself, but it's very subtle, and it's looking at the wrinkles, the natural wrinkles on a face, and kind of aligning them into the bark such that it starts to become this mystery in the bark. Right? The combination of the side view and the profile view and the frontal view, and kind of how those two come together, I think can be a very interesting combination. Blends with your mind a bit. Combination of drawing turning into the actual photograph. So you've got the same location, same shot. You've got the drawing of the pencil and the hand coming together, and it's drawing, but that transitions into the actual person's hand. Likewise, on the other side of that hand drawing, it's kind of a natural break between the pencil drawing and the color photograph. Right? Another example here, you could actually print out the pictures and then cut them, right? But in this particular case, it was a combination of masking that allowed her to do this without having to do it. But again, compositionally interesting in terms of how those come together. I think they were channeling The Walking Dead a little bit in this, but you get the idea of the combination of the skull and the woman and how they kind of work against each other. And so this is another example here of kind of the little container holding the mini tree. In this particular context, the tree and the landscape were then inserted into this little glass broken plastic ball. The dirt was collaged in. It's a lot of different elements that have come together with special attention to how the light actually plays into the scene. The fact that it's a very symmetrical composition, I think, still works because of the jagged edge of the plastic or glass sphere that kind of makes it not symmetrical anymore. Okay? So those are a bunch of examples that students have done in the past. If you're still needing more ideas, go look at the galleries of previous coursework to kind of see how things come together. And we're going to transition from seeing these examples into how to do masking and how to really isolate objects such that we can then combine them together. So let me transition for a second, and then I'll show you some examples. So we're going to start exercise 107 with part 1, and that is isolating objects or learning how to isolate objects. And there are a variety of ways of dealing with isolating objects. The thing that I want to concentrate on most is masking, because we did a little bit of masking last class, but this kind of extends the concept of masking forward quite a bit, because it's really the most valuable thing you can learn relating to architectural collage work is the ability to mask and control what parts of an image are shown and what parts of an image aren't shown. So we kind of concentrate on that. I'll touch briefly on some of the other strategies for isolating objects, though I think concentrating on the masking is by far the best strategy. So the first thing that I need is I need some images to start that I can work from. And one of the things is finding an image that works nicely, that you'll be able to isolate, that looks good, and that you'll be able to use long term. So I asked you in exercise 104, maybe it was 103, I think my numbers are off, to go out and photograph people. I think it was 5 images of people. So if you did that, you can, of course, use your own images instead of finding other images. If you don't feel like your pictures are particularly good, or you want to use a Creative Commons licensed image instead, I have no problem with that. The problem for you, however, is actually finding an image that you like and that works nicely. And so what you search for kind of matters. So I did one for holding hands walking, was an example, to find a variety of different pieces. Obviously, some images are more appropriate than others. One of the key things relating to this is that you want to find images with the whole person. So images like these, while yes, this might be nice to have a picture of a guy with a briefcase, see how his feet are cut off? Right? That's not a good image to use, because when you go to put it into a scene later, if you don't have the feet, you're limited in where that person can actually exist in the particular scene. So as you look through, you want to make sure you include images that have the whole person, right? Something like that. And so it's up to you as to which images you want to pick. It used to be really easy. You could just put in a search for walking, but now that Walking Dead is so popular, everything when you come up with that is like zombies and whatever. So you have to be a little more creative. Jogging, running, right? Those kinds of things. So I went through and I picked a variety of images, and I just opened them in new tabs so that I can kind of get a sense for what I think would work. Some of these I'm looking at for the first time here have kind of a texture applied to them, and I'm not a big fan of that texture. So I'm going to get rid of that one. Right? That one could be okay. Could be kind of an interesting one. Maybe we'll use it. In this instance, the lighting is coming from behind. Right? So I'd have to be integrating this person into a scene where the lighting was coming from behind. So you kind of want to pay attention to where the light directions are coming from. This one's a pretty good one because the lighting's coming from one side, which would match up well. The problem is, if we look at this, the image of the person is rather blurry. Right? And I'd rather have a little bit sharper image. So I'm probably not going to use that one. This one will work. Right? This one's pretty good. It looks maybe a little bit blurry, and we're limited to this being black and white. But I have the whole person, so that one's not too bad. Right? Something like this one's not bad. You've got the dogs to isolate as well. May or may not be useful. Right? This one is a pretty good silhouette to be able to cut out people. Might be useful, might not be. Right? This one's very good. I like this, but again, the lighting is coming from behind. But I'm going to use this as an example because of her hair. So we'll use that as an example as well. So let me go ahead and save this image. So I'm going to click on the little download link in the lower right corner. And I want to download the original size, basically as large as possible. And I'll start with this one. So let me go ahead and show in the folder. And I want to copy it over to my flash drive. Make a new folder here. And I'll go ahead and paste it. Okay. I had some other images that I've done previously that you can see something like this. That one's not bad. Could use something like that. Depends. The point is, you have to find some images that work for you. So let me go ahead and let me open up Photoshop. And then I'm going to go ahead and open up that image. So I'll go to File and then Open. And let's open up that image. So there it is. Okay. So in this particular image, I was okay with it, even though the very bottom of the shoe is cut off right down here. I think I can approximate that bottom okay, such that when it's a little bit further away, it won't distract from us. So in this context, I'm cutting out two people instead of just one person. But again, I think it'll work out okay in the long run. So this image is already relatively cropped. So I'm not going to worry about cropping the image down before I start masking. Okay? So first thing is, if we come over and look at this layer, I have something called background, and it's locked. So before I do anything, I'm going to right-click on the background layer, and I'm going to say Duplicate Layer. And that will give me a working layer. Right? Notice it's unlocked. The text isn't italicized. And then I'll just turn off the locked background layer, and we'll just leave it alone. Right? If I ever needed the original image back, I could go back to that layer. But we're going to start working on a nice new layer. So I have a variety of strategies for how to actually isolate the people. And so the most simple strategy, right, would be to zoom in on the particular object, something like this. And then it would be to use the eraser and to just go along and kind of erase right along the object. Okay? The problem is when we get close, right, maybe something like this, it's really kind of hard to get a good seam there. So Photoshop came up with a strategy that might work a little bit better, and that's called the background eraser tool, which is up here underneath the eraser. It's called the background eraser tool. It's an eraser with a little pair of scissors on it. Okay? And what this does is it looks for similar colors, right, and will let you come along and kind of erase stuff that's close to your particular object. And you see it does a pretty good job of not accidentally erasing the object itself. I lost a little bit of the object there. Okay? So it's okay, but it's really not that great of a solution either. Right? But I like to point out that those are the first standard things that people tend to do when they erase an object. So we're going to do something slightly different, and we're going to use something called the Magnetic Lasso. And so if we come up here, there's a magic wand, and underneath it's called the Quick Selection tool. Excuse me, we're going to use the Quick Selection tool. Okay? And what the Quick Selection tool does is it allows me to kind of drag, and I'm clicking and dragging, a box. And as I do that, you can see that it's jumping to edges. Right? If I hold down Shift, I can add to it. Actually, I don't have to hold down Shift. I can keep adding to it, and I can work my way in. Now, in that context, as I was selecting, I jumped and ended up selecting the whole hand. Right? If I hold down the Alt key, I could subtract from the selection. So I held down Alt, and I got rid of that. And then we'll keep going, right, where we'll keep adding to the selection. We'll come down here, we'll add to the selection. And you can see that it's doing a pretty good job of isolating my object. Right? Then we'll work up between his legs. Like that. Right? Maybe I lost a little bit. We'll hold down Alt, and we'll fine-tune that a little bit. And then we'll keep working our way over on this side. There we go. Notice that it jumped over and selected her leg as well. I'll hold down Alt because we lost a little bit of her shoe there. There we go. And we'll keep working our way up, adding to the selection. There you go. It jumped up there nicely. Jumped up there nicely. Let's try to add a little bit right in there. Perfect. A little bit right in there. Something like that. Now, I might have to subtract off a little bit. But you see that it's doing a pretty good job of isolating these objects. Let me add this to the selection here. So it's as simple as really dragging like that. All right, so let's continue over the top. Now, notice, okay, I did a good job there. Notice that it's stuck on the dark outline of her hair, not the wispiness of her hair. That's going to be a problem long term. So we're going to come back and we're going to work with that in a little bit. But I'm going to keep going down and around the object, or in this case the person. We'll keep selecting. And we'll work our way around. Perfect. Need a little bit more. And I need to not include that strap and not include her hand. And maybe a little bit more right in there. Not quite enough. All right, so something like that. Okay? So I've worked my way around the objects reasonably well. Now I'm going to concentrate on a couple things. Most notably is the hair. And how do I deal with the hair? Okay? So if I were to zoom in on her head, we could see that as we look through the hair, right, some of the color of the background kind of shines through. So it would be a lot of work to go in and actually try to select each of these individual little hairs right, as I were isolating. So I'm going to use a tool that's called the Refine Edge tool. So after I have the selection done, I'm going to go up to the Select menu, and I'm going to select something called Refine Edge. Okay? And what Refine Edge does is it gives me some options for how this selection is going to happen. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to set two values. The smoothing I'm going to go to 3, and the feather I'm going to go to 0.3. And those are just two values that I've found work pretty nicely for what you're trying to do. Okay? The other thing that's important to recognize is I'm going to change this edge detection radius to be 1. Okay? And so once I have those options set, then I can look in this view mode and I can change how I'm seeing this particular scene. So right now I'm showing something called on black, which means that my selected area, if I were to zoom out, right, is all black, and everything outside of it is just normally colored. Okay? Now, if I switch my view mode, for example, to be overlay mode, right, everything that's selected is kind of a red color. If I switched it to be black on white, I just see a cutout of black and white. Okay? So I'm going to use the overlay mode for right now. And now that I have that mode selected, I'm going to go ahead and just paint in the regions of her hair here. All right, we'll let it process. And it's going to start to fill in so that we don't have such a sharp edge. It'll start to fade the edge. And let me switch here into black on white, and you can start to see that the hair is starting to show up. Right? And so maybe this hair is a little bit light in this particular example, so it's not showing up as well as I'd like. All right, I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to change my selection a little bit. So let me jump back and subtract from the selection so that I get a little bit more of the lighter components of her hair here. Take a little bit more. Sorry. All right, so I have a little bit more of her hair there, and I'm going to come over here and deal with his as well. So let's get a little bit more. So again, holding down Alt while I do this. Something like that. All right, so now we'll go back to her hair, and we'll go back to Refine Edge. So select Refine Edge, and we're going to go back with our same settings, a radius of 1, a smooth of 3, and a feather of 0.3. And then I'm again going to kind of paint this edge in here. And now you can see with that red that the red is starting to extend out. See how it's extending out and coloring in those little bits of hair? That's what I'm after. So I'm just painting over these sections. And it's looking for little holes as part of the hair. Right? And so you can kind of see how we're starting to see through, right, these little areas of hair. All right, so let me do this side here. Looking pretty good. Come up here, do a little bit more. The what?
You know that square with the circle in the center?
Yes, down here. That one?
Oh, no, the one in the toolbar. Underneath.
The quick mask?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. This is a lot like it. The difference is that I have different view modes such that I can switch to black and white and see what it looks like here. Okay? So there's going to be a few errors. We're going to come in and correct those a little bit, but you can see that I'm able to isolate her hair in a much better manner here. Okay, so let me switch for just a second back to overlay, and I'm going to do his hair here and refine the edge right there, and I'm going to refine the edge right here as well. There we go. And when I'm done, I'll go ahead and say OK. Okay, now in reality, I would probably go down and double check around their fingers and whatever else, all the edges. Okay? But what I've essentially done in doing that selection is I've changed the selection around the hair, which is the most important part. So if, at this point, I come down here and I click on the Add Layer Mask, right? When I do that, oops, sorry, premature, I have to go up to Select Inverse to select the opposite of what I had selected, right? And then I can come down and click the Add Layer Mask. And when I do that, the background becomes transparent, and I have just the people isolated. And notice that in my image, I have the original image, and then I have a mask, just like we created last class, right? I have a mask that gets rid of the background and makes it transparent. The transparent background is now this checkerboard pattern, okay? Which is how I know that it's transparent. If I look in here carefully, right, I can see that there's little bits of her hair that shine through, such that when I put a background behind this, right, I'll be able to see the background through the edges of her hair, which is the important part. So now that I've gotten to this piece, right, looks like I missed a little bit down below here. And this is one of the big advantages of masking, right? If you make a mistake, see here, I didn't quite select that. Because it's a mask, I can always come back with my paintbrush. Let's make this a little bit smaller. And I can paint in and get rid of that little piece, right? Because it's a mask. If I made a mistake and I lost something that I wanted, say this edge of the bag, oh, that was supposed to be there, right? I can flip my colors and I can paint in white. And we can get that piece back. Oh, it looks like I made a mistake and that actually was gone. So let me come back and we can paint that particular piece out. So because it's a mask, we have a lot of flexibility in fine-tuning the various pieces of this. So if I go back to Control 0, there the people are. Okay? So now it's a matter of saving. So when we do a save of this, we need to make sure that we save the transparency of the background. The last thing we want is to have a white background, right? Because we want to be able to take this and place it directly in our particular scene such that we can apply a background to it, right? Or integrate these people into a background. So I'm going to save them instead of a JPEG as a PNG file. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, not Save for Web, just File, Save As. And instead of Photoshop here, I'm going to pick PNG. Right? And PNG will allow me to save the transparency of the background. So let me go ahead and rename this, and we'll rename it Couple Holding Hands. And I'll go ahead and click Save. Okay? So it can be the smallest file size, and that's fine. We'll go ahead and say OK. And as soon as it's done saving, we'll go look at it. There it is, couple holding hands, right? And in this particular case, the background is going to be transparent. Okay? So we've got that done. Now I'd like to do a couple other things. One, I'd like to make these people in black and white, right? And the reason that I do color, black and white, and just a gray silhouette is because those are the three most common uses that will end up in an architectural scene. So if I do them now and I save them on my flash drive, I'll have these people to use later on, and I won't have to cut them out again. Right? So let's go ahead and quickly do a black and white. We've done this before. It's under Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Channel Mixer, Monochrome, and then we can adjust based on one of the presets, whatever looks right. I'll go ahead and go to File, Save As, and again, this is going to be a PNG file. It's going to be the couple holding hands, but it's black and white. I'll click Save. And so the last one is I want to do one as a silhouette. So it's just a single color. And for me personally, I like to do a color that's just a uniform 75% gray. So I'll come in here and under the CMY are cyan, magenta, and yellow colors, which is part of a printing system. The K value is black. So if I do a K value of 75, it's kind of a nice medium to dark gray. I'll say OK. I created a new layer, so I came down here and just said New Layer. And then I'll use my paintbrush to make it a little bit bigger here. And I'm just going to paint this whole layer in that dark gray. Okay, something like that. Now I want this mask to apply to this layer, which we did last time, right? So I'm going to select the mask, I'm going to hold down the Alt key on the keyboard, and I'm going to drag the mask up to layer 1. And now we see that the people are cut out. And you can also see that her hair, right, has little wisps, which is part of how it's going to integrate nicely into the background. Okay? He has a little bit there on the sides as well. So now these are gray figures that I can use as silhouettes on some kind of an architectural drawing. So let me go ahead and go to File, Save As. Again, it's going to be a PNG file. And this is going to be gray. And I'll go ahead and click Save. So I have those 3 images saved. So let's go ahead and do another one. I'm going to ask you to do 5, right, people as part of today's exercise. Let's go ahead and do one more. I'll go to File and then Open. And let me pick another one. Did I save any more? No, I haven't saved any more yet. Hold on. All right, let's do this one. I'm going to download the original size. And let's copy it. Put it on my flash drive. There it is. And while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and close that. I'll save this as a Photoshop file just for later, just in case. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to Open, and I'm going to open that person running right there. Okay, so I'm going to use the same strategy, same strategy for this. I'll use my Quick Selection tool. Right? Let's zoom in a little bit more. And I'm going to work my way around the person. Right, and it did pretty well. Let me double check a few things here. I lost a little bit of a shoe right there. So let's subtract that part right there. Add a little bit back there, add a little bit back there. All right, we'll work our way back up here. Fingers look okay. Fingers look okay there. Right, hair, we need to add some hair back in, so we'll get closer to the edge there. Yeah, about like that. Pretty good. All right, so now we'll go back into the Select, Refine Edge. And we'll do 1, and then 3, and then 0.3. And then let me zoom in a little bit more. The last image was a higher resolution image, so this one, the results aren't going to be as good. Let me go ahead and paint this top edge there. We get a little bit of fuzzing, which is what we were after. When I'm done, I'll go ahead and say OK. And then I'll inverse my selection, so I'll go to Select and then Inverse. Now I forgot to make a duplicate of the background, so I need to do that before I can add the layer mask. So let me say Duplicate Layer. And we'll turn the first one off. And now I can click on the Add Layer Mask, and we'll then cut this person out. So it looks like I missed a few pieces. Right? I missed a little bit of his shoulder there. Remember, since it's a mask, I can come back with my paintbrush. I can paint in white. Make this a little bit bigger. There. And I can paint back in that part of his shoulder that I lost. Right? Looks like I lost a little bit there as well. So the point is, with a mask, it's really easy to get back something if you accidentally missed it. Looks like I missed a little bit of his head there, so we'll get that part back as well. Right? And now that I have that, I can press Control-0. It's a matter of saving this. Now, in this particular scene, I really should probably crop it a little bit tighter to the person because I don't need all of this extra space. So I'll come to the Crop tool here, and we'll just pull this. Oh, it doesn't need to be constrained. We'll pull this a little bit tighter to the person, something like that. I'll go ahead and say OK. And so now I have this person running in color. So we'll save as a PNG. And so we'll call this man running. And I'll go ahead and click save. Black and white version, layer, new adjustment layer, channel mixer, monochrome. And again, I would go through and find which filter looks right for what I was after. I'll go ahead and save this. So I'll go to File, Save for Web. Oops, excuse me. Talk about habit. We'll go to File, Save As, PNG. This is the man running black and white. Click Save. There we go. And then I'll do the one with the gray. So again, a new layer, paintbrush with 75% gray, 00075. Make this a little bit bigger. Paint that in. And then I'll hold down Alt and copy this mask from that layer to this layer. And there it is as just a silhouette. And I'll go to File, Save As, PNG. Gray, and click Save. Okay, so you're going to isolate 5 people, right? Which takes some time, and that's the idea, right? But the advantage here is that once you've isolated these people, right, you'll post them on the website, and then you can all share. So we went from you having 5 images to you having 5 times 30. What would that be? 90, 150 images, right? So you now have 150 people to pick from, right? And the even better news is classes before you also have lots of images, right? So the more of these people you have, the easier it is for you to populate your drawings with people. And the best thing to do is to put people in your drawings, right? So there is method to this madness. Okay? So once you have these 5 images saved, right, you're going to move on to posting the images, which I'll show you in just a second. And then I do on the back have something for tiling textures, which I'm going to hold off to talk to you about until you get further down the road today, and then I'll come back and talk to you about the tiling textures. I haven't previously combined these together in the same lecture before, and so I don't know whether we have the right amount of time or not. It kind of depends on how you do. So you're going to give me feedback as we go today and see if this is too much or not enough or whatever. Okay? So we're going to start with those 5 people, though. Okay, so when you go to post these images, right, I'm going to go ahead and go to Digital Tools. I'm going to go to New Post. And you're going to do a separate post for each person or each grouping of people. Okay? So here's my first post. And this was the couple holding hands. So let's call it couple holding hands. Right? And so I'm going to click on Add Media. And then I'll upload my files. And I'm going to upload the couple holding hands black and white, and the couple holding hands in gray. I'm going to select all 3 of these by holding down the Control key and clicking on each one. And then I'll go ahead and say Open. And it's going to upload all 3 at once. All right, we're still waiting on this last one. All right, so all 3 of those are there. Notice that all 3 have little check marks next to them. I can go ahead and click on Insert into Post, and I'll get all 3 of them in the post. Starting with the first one, there's all 3. I'm going to come down here to the bottom, and I'm going to set the featured image as the colored version. So we'll pick the colored version, and I'll click Set Featured Image, which will then show up there. A second. Now, the next piece is actually important, and that is that I'm going to, on the right side, there'll be something called Collage Images. And this is a way of categorizing who these people are, right? And so I can look in here, and you can see that I can come down here. Let's see here. These are people. It's a couple, right? And I can basically check these boxes, and you can see that there's a bunch of categories that people have put in before. If you can't find a similar category, so holding hands is there too, right? You can click on this Add New, and this will let you add in your own tag of whatever works for you. Okay, so I have those checked. Then I'm going to come up into the categories and make sure that I check that this is exercise 107. Right? And then when I'm done, I'll go ahead and publish. Right? So I'm not worried that this has your name in the title because I'll be able to see that you did it. Go ahead and say OK there. And it should publish. Okay, so you're going to do one for each grouping of images. So in this case, I said the couple, it's one post for that. I'd go back and make another post for the guy that was running, and it would be one post for his 3 images. So you'll end up making 5 posts of people today. Okay? Then we'll evaluate time as we go forward in the class, and I'll show you tiling textures, and/or you'll increase the number of objects that you do, which when you read, you'll see that. Okay? Are there any questions before I turn you loose for a while? Yeah. Okay, individual. Okay, sounds good.